18 past the hour, nearly 100 National Guard troops and dozens of federal officers descended on MacArthur Park in Los Angeles yesterday, a majority immigrant neighborhood known as the Ellis Island of the West Coast. The park was nearly empty as officials moved through in military vehicles and on horseback for about an hour before abruptly leaving. Local officials said the operation seemed designed to sow fear in the community. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass witnessed the operation in person and slammed the move on social media, calling it, quote, absolutely outrageous. The Department of Homeland Security refused to say whether anyone had been arrested and would not comment on ongoing enforcement operations. This comes weeks after thousands of demonstrators marched in LA and around the country to protest increased immigration enforcement. Jonathan.
More of these types of maneuvers in blue cities. We saw from LA, much to the outrage of officials there who also have expressed real concerns about that city's economy because they rely so much on some of these migrants doing jobs around the city who are now afraid to show their face. Joining us now, U.S. national editor at the Financial Times, Ed Luce. Ed, good to see you. Your latest piece is titled Trump's Ominous ICE Security State. We want to get right to it. Here's part of what you wrote. The nation of immigrants' shift to mass deportation is among the most anticipated turns in U.S. history. Trump has for years compared undocumented migrants to animals. During the 2024 campaign, he even claimed that Haitians living in a small town in Ohio were eating each other people's pets. Though there is nothing glacial about it, Trump is ushering in America's ICE age. He has catapulted ICE into America's best-funded law enforcement agency and, increasingly, beyond accountability. The agency's in-house watchdog was scrapped earlier this year. For the time being, the lower courts can do little to rein it in. The Supreme Court last year gave Trump sweeping immunity from official acts he takes as president. That makes ICE Trump's de facto private army, his security state within the state. So, Ed, talk to us more about this. You saw those images and outrage to what we saw in Los Angeles, not limited to the mayor's office there. A lot of elected leaders suggested this was an unnecessary show of force meant to simply intimidate. There's also, of course, the debate about ICE agents, whether or not they should be permitted to wear masks as they conduct their rounds. Talk to us more about what worries you about ICE, which is now, thanks to the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, is going to have even more money at its disposal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really vexing and important question that this agency that's going to go from $9 billion to $30-something billion a year budget, recruit 10,000 new agents, get, as we saw in MacArthur Park yesterday, all the tactical gear and armored personnel carriers it needs. That scene in MacArthur Park with choppers and drones overhead. Horse formations from the National Guard and ICE is clearly an attempt to intimidate people to self-deport. They want to frighten people, sow fears into these communities so that they don't have to put them into one of these new alligator Alcatraz detention camps, that they will just leave the country through fear. So what we have is a fear campaign, which is going to escalate, and I think is extremely worrying for the future of U.S. rule of law, people's confidence in law enforcement, and as you mentioned, the fact that they are still not obliged to identify themselves or show their faces just underlines how alarming this situation is. It's happening very, very quickly.
And Ed, go a little further, if you will, about your concerns how that Trump might even use this force, other federal agencies, to target his political opponents. We have seen a number of elected officials, Democrat elected officials, be arrested at some of these facilities or at protests, or in New York City, a mayoral candidate who was simply at an immigration court hearing was detained for 4 hours. And we now have Trump, whose lawyers have challenged the birthright citizenship in the Constitution. He's even suggesting that he would try to deport the Democratic nominee for mayor in New York, Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, and so, you know, this is going to be a story on and off of the Supreme Court, because ultimately, you know, they're going to have to rule on some of these questions, including whether the president has the right to remove citizenship from naturalized Americans. And, of course, Zoran Mamdani is a naturalized American. Trump has indeed dropped the hint that he's prepared to consider removing his citizenship. The detention centers, this $45 billion that ICE has got to build lots of alligator Alcatrazes around the country. Under the law, lawmakers, members of Congress, have the right to visit them, to check on reports that they're inhumane and not providing basic sort of basic provisions to their inmates. ICE has ignored that law and said they have to give 72 hours notice. Now, that Supreme Court ruling on the 27th, where the Trump administration succeeded in getting the Supreme Court to say they can ignore lower court stays and injunctions, that means that ICE can continue to do things like this, can continue to disguise their identity, can continue to have military-style maneuvers in children's playgrounds without any fear of legal legal recourse. And so, of course, this is a tool that Trump's going to use. Imagine that MacArthur scene, Park scene around polling stations in November 2026. Imagine whatever pretext is used for them to declare in a swing state or in a swing county that there are national security concerns with illegals, and what effect that would have on voting turnout. You don't really need to use your imagination. We're seeing dress rehearsals for that kind of thing in MacArthur Park and elsewhere.
You know, one more item here. We're also following the latest from Texas, where Border Patrol agents and an armed suspect exchanged gunfire yesterday. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park has the details on that.
A Border Patrol facility in McAllen, Texas, on high alert after a shooter armed with a rifle opened fire.
We received a call in McAllen PD at about 5:50 this morning of a person basically assaulting and attacking the federal building.
Officials say federal agents fired back and helped neutralize the shooter. During the deadly exchange, the McAllen police chief saying an officer was injured.
There were many dozens of rounds fired by the suspect towards the building and towards agents in that building.
Authorities identifying the suspect as 27-year-old Ryan Lewis Mosqueda, who they say had other weapons and more ammunition. The police chief said Mosqueda was reported missing near McAllen, later arriving in a vehicle with Michigan license plates, which also displayed a spray-painted Latin phrase, Cordis Dei, or Day of the Heart.
When someone drives onto a parking lot and opens fire, there is some premeditation involved, as far as I'm concerned.
Near McAllen, Weslaco police say they stopped Mosqueda's father for a traffic violation just before 4 a.m., who claimed his son, Ryan Mosqueda, was missing and had a mental deficiency. Police say no documentation was provided to support that claim. His father also telling authorities Ryan Mosqueda had weapons in his vehicle. Officials assuring the public there's no longer an active threat, but growing questions about the suspect's possible motive and if anyone else may have been involved in the attack.